All right, guys, welcome to the episode 7 of ISO 9001 2015 series. And in this episode, we will be discussing about clause 4, which is context of the organization. During these presentations, just to make life easier for you, I will be using Doodlies. And because I just started using this software and I'm not still very comfortable with this, so maybe the quality might be not as good as you expect. So I would like to apologize in advance for any poor quality during the presentation. So as I told you earlier, that clause 4 is basically the starting point for ISO 9001 2015 standard. The first three clauses, they are generic in nature, and they are providing generic information about the organization, about the ISO organization, about the past history of ISO organization, about the references, about the definitions, about the principles which are being used in this particular standard. And the actual standard starts from clause number 4, and that clause number 4 is called context of the organization. This terminology, context of the organization, is quite new in ISO 9001. Previously, this terminology was not used. So, this is the first time standard is talking about context of the organization. The clause is divided into four subclauses. 4.1, understanding the organization and its context. 4.2 is needs and expectations of interested parties. 4.3 is determining the scope of quality management system. 4.4 is quality management system and its processes. Personally speaking, I feel that the clause 4.3 should be at the first place, which is determining the scope of quality management system, because that's the first activity an organization should do before establishing quality management system. They should draw the scope, where exactly they want to implement quality management system. So the boundaries needs to be established at the very first place, and then only we can move forward and we can establish quality management system. But anyways, this is an important clause. All these four clauses, which are part of clause 4, they are extremely important, and we will learn one by one what exactly these clauses are requiring from the organization. So, clause number 4.1 is understanding the organization and its context. And this is, as I told you earlier, that this is a new clause. It was not there before. And I believe that they brought this clause in because of the risk based thinking, because this is the first time risk based thinking is introduced in ISO 9001. And once you would like to identify the risk and possible opportunities, you need to know the sources of those risks and opportunities. So, unless and until you are fully aware about the context of the organization, those issues, those internal factors, or those external factors which have the ability to affect on your quality management system, if you don't have the knowledge of those factors and those issues, you will not be in a position to identify the risk and opportunities appropriately. So this is one of the clauses which is the foundation of quality management system. If you are weak in this foundation, the overall quality management system will be definitely weak. I also call these two clauses 4.1 and 4.2 as knowledge based clauses, because they are just trying to develop the required knowledge among the team which is establishing quality management system. And without this knowledge, if your team which is developing the quality management system is not knowledgeable about the relevant factors, about the internal factors and external factors which have the capability to influence your quality management system, in that case your quality management system will not be as per your expectations. So you need to make sure that all the dimensions of the organization, they are covered, they are looked into, and the relevant people. Definitely it will not be done by one person. Different people will make sure that those dimensions are covered, and we are as an organization fully aware of the internal and external issues. For example, there might be issues related to the suppliers, there might be issues related to the customer, there might be issues related to the legal requirements, there might be issues related to the governments, there might be issues related to the conflicts in the region. Maybe some wars are happening, maybe some duty restrictions are there, maybe some export bans are there. So all these things needs to be considered, because every single element will be having an impact of you on your quality management system. So you need to make sure, as an organization, not as an individual, as an organization, you need to make sure that you are fully aware of all those dimensions. So once you are fully aware In the next step, when we'll go to the clause 6, where we will be talking about the identification of risks and opportunities, at that point in time, you will be requiring this knowledge, because if you want to identify the risk, if you want to identify the opportunities, and your team is not having sufficient knowledge about the factors, sufficient knowledge about the issues related to the organization, whether it is internal or whether it is external, uh, then you will not be able to identify risk properly. You will not be able to identify opportunities properly. And if you don't identify risk and opportunities properly, definitely the whole management system will be weak, because this quality management system is based upon risk-based thinking. In risk-based thinking, starting point is identification of risk, and rest of the things comes later. Like, you will be providing the resources, you will be establishing controls, you will be doing monitoring and measurement, you will be taking corrective actions, but all those activities will be done later. The very first activity is identification and acknowledging the risk and opportunities. So if your knowledge base is weak, if the people who are developing the system, they don't really know what are the issues organization is surrounded with, what are the issues related to suppliers, what are the issues related to customers, what are the issues related to the legal bodies, what are the issues related to our own employees, their knowledge, their skills, their age, their health. So if we are not fully aware of these dimensions, as a result of that lack of knowledge or poor knowledge, we will not be in a position to identify risks properly. We will not be able to identify opportunities properly. And as a result, the overall management system will be very weak. Now, the question is, do we need to document internal and external factors? This is the area where we have a lot of debate, and different people are having different opinion. The issue is, most of the auditors, they want to see some sort of documentation. Although, if you look into the requirement of clause 4.1, it does not specifically say anywhere that you have to maintain a record of this particular clause, or you have to produce a document against this particular clause. But majority of the auditors, they demand, they want to see some sort of evidence, they want to see some sort of documents. And the auditee is also confused that whether we should maintain the documentation or we should not maintain the documentation. You need to understand a basic logic when you look into this particular clause. This particular clause is the knowledge based clause. The standard wants you to have the relevant knowledge about your organization. So, are you fully aware about your organization? Do you really know your organization? And do you know the dimensions of your organization? Do you know the internal factors which are having an impact on your quality management system? For example, do you know your resources? Do you know your employees? Do you know what you are lacking in the employees? Do you know their competencies? Do you know their health condition? Do you know their abilities and qualifications? Do you know your machineries? Do you know your processes? Do you know your procedures? So all these issues which may have an impact on your quality management system, are you fully aware of them? Secondly, if there are external factors, for example, the customer is having certain requirements, are you aware of those requirements? The legal bodies are having certain requirements, are you aware of those requirements? There might be some penalties which are imposed in your sector. So, are you aware of those penalties? There might be certain restrictions which are applicable in your sector. Are you fully aware of those restrictions? There might be some import regulations. There might be some export regulations. There might be some legal issues. There might be some governmental issues. There might be some conflicts in the region. There might be some expected war in the region. So, all those factors, all those issues which may have an impact on your quality management system, your organization. The question is, are you fully aware of those? Why we need to be aware of those? Because if we are aware of those, we can identify relevant risk and opportunities, and then we can take care of them by taking appropriate actions and establishing appropriate plans. Now the issue is, do we need to document this? The answer is very ambiguous, very debatable, because a standard does not require documentation, or a standard does not make it mandatory that you should have document. But majority of the organizations, you will see, they are documenting this particular clause. Some of them are using maybe the SWOT analysis. Some of them are using pestle analysis. Some of them are writing a procedure which is defining the context of the organization. Some of them are doing a risk assessment where they are defining the context of the organization. But keep in mind, if you are adopting any of these approaches, SWOT analysis, pestle analysis, writing in the manual, or writing in any other document, if you are adopting any one of those methodologies, that is absolutely fine, but that is not one of the mandatory requirements. That's not basically what a standard wants from your side. If you have documented it, well and good, but it's not something mandatory. What exactly a standard wants? A standard wants you to be knowledgeable. The standard wants you to be knowledgeable about these elements, about these issues, about these dimensions. So when it comes to the development of quality management system, whether you are identifying processes or you are identifying risk and you are establishing controls, you are establishing monitoring and measurement, at that point of time you are knowledgeable enough to develop the management system in an effective way. So you must have realized now that the documentation or no documentation is not at all a question here. It doesn't matter whether you have documented it or you haven't documented it. The important thing is, while you are establishing and maintaining your quality management system, at that point of time, the knowledge is there and the knowledge is being used while identifying the processes, while identifying the risk, and while identifying the controls, monitoring and measurement, and other issues related to the management system. Sometimes what happens that the organization hires an external body, external consultant, who is not having any information, any knowledge about these internal and external factors related to the organization, how the employees are, how much competent they are, what qualifications they have. The consultant is not aware. The external factors, who are the customers, who are the suppliers, what do they want, and how the legal bodies are there, and what sort of issues are faced by the organization. The consultant is completely unaware of those issues, and he becomes responsible to develop the quality management system. He's the one who writes procedures, he writes manuals, he writes like policies, he develops the forms and formats, he develops the risk matrix, or he develops the risk identification register, and he develops all the controls, he develops all the monitoring and measurement, and he develops the complete management system without the support of the relevant people. So imagine in that case, somebody who have zero knowledge about your internal and external factors, he's developing the management system. How come this management system address those internal and external factors? How come the risk which he will identify will be addressing all those dimensions which exist in your organization? So that's one of the areas where you need to think many times before hiring an external person, because when you are hiring an external person, you cannot completely depute the whole project to him without any involvement from the organizational side. The organizational knowledge related to the context of the organization, you will not find it with one person. Even if you do the effort, you will not be able to find it with the one person. The maybe information related to the suppliers, information related to the products, that might be available with the procurement department. The information related to the customers might be available with the sales and marketing department. Information related to your own product and your own processes might be available with the operations. Information related to the employees might be available with the HR department. So various different people, various key stakeholders within your organization might be having this information. So when you develop the management system, doesn't matter whether you develop internally or you hire a consultant, when you develop the management system, how you are basically funneling this information from those people who are responsible, who are aware, who are competent, who knows the internal factors, who knows the external factors, and that information should be funneled to the place where you are identifying your processes and where you are identifying your risk within the organization. If that is not done, if first of all, if that is not ensured that people are competent and people are knowledgeable and they are having information, that is one thing. The second thing is, if that is not ensured that information is transformed into risk, transformed into process, transformed into the controls, monitoring, measurement, corrective action, if that is not done, that will be a disaster. And most of the organizations are facing the same issue. They for the sake of compliance, for the sake of satisfying the auditor, they identify some of the dimensions in form of SWOT analysis, pestle analysis, or in form of a procedure. But when it comes to the practicality, when it comes to the implementation, that information is most of the time outdated, and that information is not basically representing all the dimensions of the organization, and that information is also not used in risk identification or in process identification as well. So this is something which is extremely important. This is a new clause, and this new clause have a purpose. Without effective understanding of this clause and without effective knowledge management related to the organization's quality management system, you will never be able to establish an effective quality management system. So make sure that knowledge is ensured, the relevant knowledge is ensured, that relevant knowledge is protected, and the relevant knowledge is directed towards those processes which are used for risk identification and identification of processes. Only then you will have if you will have an effective quality management system. Now, it doesn't matter whether you document this knowledge management approach or not. You document it, wonderful, well and good. Auditors will be satisfied, you will be satisfied, and you will be able to utilize the information which is documented throughout your process, and you will be able to achieve your targets. But just make sure that whatever you document, it's a continuous process, it's a continuous changing environment. That knowledge will be changing with time, so you need to make sure that knowledge is always updated and always like directed towards the relevant processes. If you are not even documenting it, if you are not developing a document for context of the organization, if you're not developing a SWOT analysis, or if you're not writing a pestle analysis, even then, if without documentation you don't have any documentation, and even then you might be able to satisfy the requirement of the standard, because standard is not making it mandatory to document it. But you need to make sure that you are assuring that the relevant people who are involved in system development, they are having the required knowledge, and they are contributing this knowledge to the identification of risk and identification of processes. So that is what this clause is all about, and nothing more, nothing less. But this is the most important clause of this standard. It's a wonderful clause, so you need to make sure that you are understanding it correctly, and when it comes for implementation, you are effectively implementing this clause.